Hey folks, welcome. Are we live? Do we have folks joining us? Let me know if you can hear us in the chat. Howdy, hey Andy. Hi Evan,
Hello.
Teresa. Yay, all right, here we go. Welcome everybody. It's great to see you all. This is our second edition of Recruiting Real Talk. I'm Steve, I'm the founder and CEO of GEM. Here's the deal, we're back because the last conversation we did maybe 2 months ago, it was so good. Honestly, I think the topic we're diving into today is one that I keep hearing about everywhere. And so I think y'all are really going to get a lot out of today's session. We're talking about fraud. We're talking about fake candidates, fake jobs, scammers, AI generated everything, and also the breakdown of trust that's happening on both sides between candidates and employers. It's gotten wild. It's gotten super wild out there. So I wanted to bring together a group of people that are seeing this stuff firsthand, so that we can just have a really honest conversation about what's happening. This is super informal. There's no vendor pitches. Though if you're GEM curious, come find us. Would love to chat with you about what we're doing about this in the space and other things. But yeah, this is just meant to be real talk, informal, honest, to the point. And today I'm joined by two really awesome experts. First, we've got Melissa Grabiner. So she's a job search and personal brand coach. She works with candidates on navigating this mess every single day. And I think we're going to hear about a lot of the things that are affecting candidates, which maybe some of us in the industry don't have as much insight into. And then I'm also joined by Martyn Redstone. So Martyn is the founder of H.A.I.R, H-A.I.R. So that focuses on AI governance and building trustworthy and ethical AI systems. And then he's also the founder of genAssess, and that helps customers assess AI readiness in candidates. So he brings a lot of relevant experience to the table as well, including on the employer side. All right, so again, today we're going to talk about fraud. We're going to talk about the stories that we're hearing, the employer practices that are killing candidate trust, what happens when authenticity breaks down on both sides. But before we jump into all that, I just wanted to give Melissa and Martyn a quick chance to introduce themselves. And also, again, I'm Steve, the founder CEO of GEM. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm just going to drop it right into the chat here if you want to connect. Let's kick it to Melissa.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm so excited to dive into what I believe are very important topics. My name is Melissa Grabiner. I am located in Chicago, born and raised. I'm a talent acquisition professional. Just a very quick summary of my background. I worked at a company called Takeda Pharmaceuticals for 18 years. I was the global TA director for our company's largest business unit. My team and I hired about 3,000 employees every year. Laid off from there, they moved my position to Boston. I didn't want to move. I ended up leaving. Long story short, I am currently a talent acquisition consultant. I work with startup companies. Most of them are in San Francisco, and help them with all of their TA needs. I am also a job search coach. So I work with various job seekers on optimizing their resumes, their LinkedIn profiles, networking strategies, job search tips and tools. And so that's been super fun and super rewarding. And, Steve, thank you so much for inviting me here today.
It's great to have you. Martyn, over to you.
Yeah, hi Steve, hi Melissa, hello everybody. My name's Martyn Redstone, and the point was made backstage earlier that my accent is not the same as anybody else's on this call, so I'm from the UK, still over here, so it's the evening over here at the minute. So I've been in the world of recruitment for just coming up for 20 years now, and actually for the last decade, that's been really immersed in the world of AI and automation. And 7 years ago, I launched probably the industry's first AI and automation agency, and I've been doing that ever since. So helping recruiters, talent acquisition teams, both internal and external, to adopt AI effectively and, more importantly, responsibly and ethically. And I suppose that's what I've been doing really for the last 12 to 18 months, was kind of relaunch the advisory with a real focus on AI risk advisory, because that's the world we live in now, where everybody's looking at AI and really excited about it, but really trepidatious about the risks that come along with it as well. And I'm here to help them.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you both. We've got some really cool topics to dig into, but we also want to keep this informal. We want you all to get as much out of this as we can, and so feel free to drop questions in the Q&A, and we'll pick from those. We'll pick from some of the things we have prepared, and hopefully we can get to as many of your questions as possible. But let's dive in. Before we even jump into fraud, I love asking this question to folks that are really active on LinkedIn. I don't know if you all follow Melissa, but she puts a ton of great content out there. Melissa, just taking off your regular LinkedIn content hat for a minute, what do you think is the biggest thing that's happening in the industry right now that no one's talking about on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I really appreciate you asking. I think everyone on the call will agree that all of the rage right now is AI to help job seekers, AI to help companies. But I think what a lot of companies are doing right now behind the scenes is leveraging their existing workforce far more than recruiting fresh talent externally. That's something I think is very common. The other thing I think is very common is that a lot of companies aren't even posting their jobs anymore. The consulting work that I do for my clients hire me because they want me to find talent proactively for them. What happens a lot, and I'm sure everyone on this call who's been searching for a job can attest, is that you might apply to a role and it's not uncommon to see hundreds and hundreds of other applicants, if not thousands. So a lot of companies right now are using their existing recruiters to use tools like LinkedIn Recruiter. So in other words, what I do for my clients is I go behind the scenes on LinkedIn using keyword searches to proactively find candidates for my clients, because they don't want to get bombarded with hundreds, if not thousands of applicants. So I don't think this is talked about a lot on LinkedIn. There is something, and I think this is very important to mention. I think there is absolutely something called the hidden job market. Real quick, I want to share with you how I found my prior job. So like I said earlier, I was at a company for 18 years. I was laid off from there. I found my next job by literally sending a note on LinkedIn to the CEO of the company that I worked for. I was there for 4 years. I had no idea if the company was hiring. As far as I was concerned, they weren't, because I didn't see a job posting. In the back of my mind, I was eyeing this company for a while, and I thought, why not reach out? The worst that can happen is I don't hear back. Well, interestingly enough, the CEO did respond to me, and she said, I'm so glad you reached out. We're actually building the recruiting function for the company. Why don't we have a conversation? 2 weeks later, I had a job offer in my hand, and I worked at that company for 4 years before they moved my position somewhere else. And I didn't want to relocate again. So for everyone on this call, I think what's really important is, and then this is what I say to all of my clients as I'm coaching them, is don't be afraid to network and reach out to potential decision makers at companies, because there is absolutely such a thing as the hidden job market. Like I said, a lot of companies don't even post their roles anymore. 90% of my clients end up ultimately finding their next jobs through networking.
That's so interesting. And actually, this is a good segue into some of the fraud and scam and things like that. I think one of the reasons, like you mentioned, Melissa, that folks aren't necessarily posting every job is because like companies are inundated with applications. They're overwhelmed. They can't get to all of them. I mean, another reason is fraud, right? Like if you post a job, you're like way more susceptible to bad actors, people trying to scam, folks that are misrepresenting who they are. And naturally, if you're going out there and finding people, you're way less likely to deal with a scammer or something fraudulent. And so I think that's like a really interesting insight, but also segue into fraud. So we're going to start with like, what are companies facing from the fraud and scam side of the house? And then we're going to shift to candidates and talk a little bit about, well, what are candidates facing? Because there's actually a lot of things that are happening in both directions. And then we can talk maybe a little bit after that about like why do we think all this stuff is happening, and what does it mean for both sides? What does it mean for trust, and is that breaking down? So. And again, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A here. We'll see if we can get to as many of them as possible. Martyn, why don't we start with you on this one? What's kind of the wildest example of fraud that you've seen or that you've heard about recently? And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, look, I think that we're hearing a lot about fraud, from one extreme to the other. 17% of hiring managers report having interviewed a deepfake candidate. 17%. Wow. That's pretty significant. And actually, on the extreme of this, the most potent example of what is ultimately a direct security breach is the threats that are involving state-sponsored actors. We know of US companies that have hired remote IT workers who were then discovered to be fake people controlled by a North Korean actor. And this action, is widely reported and was even confirmed by the FBI. The critical failure in those kind of cases is that the candidate used a stolen identity and successfully passed multiple video interviews and background checks. And obviously the goal wasn't employment, it wasn't the paycheck, it was infiltration. After being onboarded, the fake employee installed malware, gained system access, and had that intent to steal intellectual property, siphon sensitive data, and commit financial fraud. Over here in the UK, that's some wild James Bond stuff going on there. That's proper, spying, state spying stuff going on. And that's the extreme. We've seen that happening, confirmed by federal law agencies.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, it's happening, and it's actually happening a lot more frequently than I expected. I was talking to one enterprise customer of ours. They deal with really sensitive data. They're they've got a lot of infrastructure that houses really sensitive data. They've caught 200 North Korean actors in just the last year alone. Yeah. And so it's a huge problem, and these attacks are getting way more sophisticated. To your point around stolen identities, I've heard that they're even setting up IP proxies in the Midwest, so you can't tell that it's from out of country. It's getting really, really, really tough.
It is. We've seen, since May 2024, at least 300 companies have inadvertently hired those North Korean fake IT workers. So you've heard of 200 workers, 300 companies have reported it since May 2024. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I saw the FBI. I actually went and read some of that, and that's how you know how real and serious this is. That the government, the FBI, is issuing a warning to tech companies or all companies in the U.S. Laura, really interesting point. I just saw you chime in chat here that you can just buy stolen identities. Apparently, they're available on the black market for less than $100 a pop, with real social security numbers and everything. That's wild.
Yeah. Funneling millions upon millions back into North Korea as well. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
For $100.
Melissa, what else are you seeing, like on the company side? Other examples of things that are happening that are making this tough for companies?
I think everything that I've been hearing about has already been stated. What I do have perspective on is what's happening from the candidate side. If I can dive into that.
Sure. And
so,
also,
yeah.
Oh, I was actually just curious, like with stolen identities. Here's another thing that I've heard about that I'm actually really curious to get your perspective on, Melissa. I've heard there's some scammers that are using real people's identities, pretending like they're them to try to land jobs. And so I'm curious if you have any perspective on that, and what does that mean for these real candidates that maybe are getting blacklisted, or have you heard or seen any of this?
Yeah, I actually recently in the last month had 2 fake profiles created that were an exact replica of mine on LinkedIn. And wow. I knew this because I had people reach out to me on LinkedIn saying, I just want you to know that. So one person, they literally completely took my entire profile, I mean, everything, and changed my last name by one letter. And then the other fake person, it was a 100% replica. I guess what happened was somehow these people on LinkedIn were reaching out to me, and then they realized after the fact that, hey, I reached out to the wrong Melissa Grabiner, the inauthentic Melissa Grabiner. So of course, what I did was I immediately reported this to LinkedIn. Thankfully and luckily, LinkedIn actually took down both of those accounts. But this typically happens with people that have a high number of followers. But it was honestly pretty scary. And it literally gave me chills to see these accounts that were exactly my own.
Yeah. Wow. I'm actually seeing some awesome tips in the chat here for ways you can detect this if this is happening. Sometimes when folks try to pretend like they're somebody they're not, they're using somebody else's LinkedIn. They're tailoring their resume to that LinkedIn profile to try to make it match. Oftentimes, though, the contact info might not match. And so phone number, email might not be the same one. And so there's actually some great tech out there. And Gem is actually working on this ourselves to be able to see if like the email or the phone number that they're applying with the resume can be tied back to that LinkedIn profile in any way through various online sources and data enrichment. So yeah, but it's hard to tell if you don't have something like that. It's kind of hard to tell if this is like the real person or not. Melissa, what? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to everyone on this call, if you are ever contacted by somebody and you're not sure if it's a scam or not, feel free to reach out to me. I literally can spot these people. I'm not kidding you. I get messages every day, multiple messages from people. Most of them I don't know. And they say, hey, take a look at this profile or take a look at this job listing or this job advertisement. What do you think about it? I, again, can spot these people a mile away. So truly open invitation to everyone on this call. If you aren't sure, send it to me. Send it to me. Yeah. I'm more than happy to review it. Last night, I got a message from one of my clients who, unfortunately, and this is happening very, very often, unfortunately received a job offer. And when she got the job offer, she realized it was a scam. So she went through this whole recruiting process. Oh. Thought everything was legit, thought the company was legit, looked up the people on LinkedIn. She reached out to me. She was completely devastated. And she said, she couldn't believe that this happened to her. So there are so many scams going on right now. LinkedIn is absolutely aware of it. And I think they're doing their very, very best to try to curtail what's happening. What I would say to everyone on this call is if you feel you're being scammed, report it to LinkedIn and block the person immediately. A lot of the common scams that I'm seeing are fake job postings, ghost jobs, people asking for upfront fee or payments. One big scam that happens all the time is people will reach out to a job seeker because, they'll know they're open to work because they've got the green circle on their banner. And they'll say, I have a great opportunity for you. Send me your resume. And then the resume gets sent. And then these people say, well, your resume isn't ATS compliant, or your resume isn't going to be up to par for the client. So here's someone that can help you with your resume. And then what happens is these people get kind of sucked into spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get a resume rewritten by someone that has very, very minimal experience. Wow. So if something is too good to be true, if someone is asking you for your social security number, for your bank details, and really at the end of the day, listen to your gut, right? Your gut hopefully will serve you well. If you feel in your heart something feels off, it probably is.
Yeah.
And job scams are a real big challenge. I think I saw a stat that was since 2023, $491 million has been estimated to be lost in job scams. It's just it's a real travesty. But I noticed on the chat there was lots of questions about what LinkedIn is doing about it. Melissa brought up some really, really good points. I do know that LinkedIn are getting really on top of forcing what they think are fake profiles to do the verification and actually locking them out of the account until they have that kind of government ID verification process completed. So I know they're trying their best, but it's so difficult. I mean, I think, again, it was like that we did some experiments and you could create an entire fake profile within less than 70 minutes, including LinkedIn, GitHub, resumes, absolutely everything.
Yeah.
I'll say this really quickly. Someone sent me an email last week, and the email felt weird. It felt off. So I looked up this guy's profile on LinkedIn. Turns out I didn't see it. So I went back to him and I said, "Can you please send me your LinkedIn URL?" So a day later, he gets back to me. He sends me the URL. He had 0 followers. The profile was incredibly minimal. And I knew it was a scam as soon as I got his email, but I wanted to kind of like push back on him and kind of challenge him there. And I was scrambling to go ahead and create a profile at the last minute. And it turned out that this guy was a complete scammer. So what I would say is always research the person, always research the company. If someone has, usually like the Gmail email addresses are, you got to be careful with those. If someone reaches out to you from a company, but they don't have like a company email, that's a scam. So just be cautious of unsolicited offers. Check the communication, check the email domain. And again, please do not share sensitive information.
Yeah, totally. I'm seeing some great questions in the chat here, by the way, even related to this conversation. One that I think we've just answered, like, don't we think that candidates deal with fraud as well? Because we were talking about the company side. And so, yeah, I mean, hopefully these are a bunch of really great examples of things to watch out for. I had a question. There's this really great question here about ghost jobs. Melissa, you mentioned ghost jobs, but didn't really expand on what those are. And somebody was wondering, do you think some companies are posting ghost jobs just to proactively build out candidate pools?
Yes.
And why do you think companies are doing that? And like, what does that sort of mean?
Yeah, I think that this is happening all the time. And I think this is a great question. It's certainly frustrating for a lot of job seekers. I would say the number one reason why companies are posting fake, or I should say ghost jobs, is resume collection, right? And what really kills me about this, and I say this to someone who's been in recruiting for many years, for companies that are trying to do proactive talent pipelining, chances are that they're not going to go back to that pipeline a year later, right? Like that typically doesn't happen. But companies do this to see who's in the job market, who is a potential candidate, down the road. Some organizations are required to post all roles publicly, even if they've already chosen an internal candidate. So that's another reason why yes, that's a big one. And so that's another reason why there's a lot of these ghost jobs. Another interesting reason is that posting fake jobs helps companies test salary expectations or skill availability in the marketplace.
Oh, interesting. So they're doing market research.
They're doing market research. Mm-hmm.
I saw a great stat as well in my prep for this webinar, which was that 62% of companies admit to posting ghost jobs to make current employees feel replaceable.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So this was I'll find the source of that in a second. It was verityai.co on their blog. 62% of companies that post fake jobs, post ghost jobs, admit that they post those jobs to make current employees feel replaceable.
Oh, wow. All right. So this is of the folks that are posting ghost jobs. This is one of the big reasons why. Yeah. Wow. That's
I was really taken aback, and that's obviously shocking. But yeah, what a incredible statistic.
Yeah, I recently made a LinkedIn post about ghost jobs, and what bothers me the most about it is that job seekers have so much on their plates right now with this competitive and challenging job market. All ghost jobs do is waste candidates' time, waste candidates' hope, and at the end of the day, hurts companies' reputations.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to shift gears back to the company side a little bit, see if there's other examples of things that are happening, and then we can come back to, well, what does this mean for both sides? Martyn, are there any other examples of things that you're hearing or seeing companies deal with? I've got a few others myself, but I'm curious if outside of the bad actor, like the nation sponsored attacks, like, is there anything else that you're hearing about?
Yeah, absolutely. Whilst obviously we hear about things like synthetic and AI generated resumes and those kind of things, and we talked about that extreme of the the bad actor. We also have this kind of interview deep fake and AI co-pilot kind of infiltration, as we want to call it. Because what we're seeing is a more very common and subtle fraud happening right now, which is real candidates that, and I love using this phrase, acting as a meat puppet for artificial intelligence, because candidates have been observed reading off of a script, hidden iPhone top of the screen, or on the corner, during live video interviews, or using AI co-pilot tools to help them pass interviews. So we're seeing that quite a lot as well. Whilst we don't consider that fraudulent insofar as pretending to be a different person, we see that fraudulent in terms of not personally answering questions or providing sometimes truthful answers to questions, because we know that AI hallucinates. So this whole concept of a candidate almost acting like a puppet for the AI, where they're just regurgitating what the AI is telling them to talk about as well. So ultimately, you're not hiring that person; you're hiring that person's subscription to ChatGPT. So massive issue. We're seeing that happening more and more now. Not just in interviews, but in coding assessments and all those kind of things. So the co-pilot threat is definitely a much bigger threat than anything else right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've definitely heard about that more and more and more, especially this year. It's started to become bigger and bigger. We even had a question in the chat, like, how can you, Martyn, do you have any ideas on how companies can detect that? Is it just a gut feel, or is there anything that you can do to understand whether somebody's using AI? Personally, I have heard of some assessment providers that are working on this to try to detect it and give you like maybe a probability score as to whether somebody might be using AI. But like, is there anything else that companies can do?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So firstly, you can, there are still tools available where you can predict a probability that somebody is using AI. And I think that's the key part. And so it's not perfect, because you can't say 100% that somebody's using AI. And if you do and chuck them out the process, then you've got some potential kind of legal issues going on there as well. But yeah, a lot of the recruiters I'm talking to about this, it's becoming very much a gut feel, watching somebody's eyes. And I know that there's AI now that can move eyes back to the center of the screen. But I think if somebody's, I think it has to open up a conversation. This is the bit that I talk to recruiters about more and more, is rather than this gut fear that somebody's kind of looking off screen and reading something over there or over there, is actually stopping and asking them whether they are, and asking them why. How's it helping them? How did they do it? Why did they decide to do it? All those kind of things. So actually, I think that it can create, rather than a negative situation, it can create a positive situation if handled correctly.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. This stuff is kind of gray area, because I think for some interviews, like, maybe it's even great that somebody's using AI and you want to test how they can use it. And then for other interviews, I think, folks prefer to test somebody, like, their own critical thinking. And I think more and more companies are being explicit about whether they expect candidates to use AI or not. But I'm curious to get Melissa's take on this and one other thing, which is, Martyn, you mentioned on top of, so before we were talking about fake people trying to impersonate others, or trying to land jobs to build backdoors, nation sponsored attacks. Now we're talking about real people maybe using AI in ways that might be starting to cross the line, right? Whether that's to use it for an interview. But Martyn, you also mentioned the AI generated resumes, and there's kind of two flavors of that I've heard about. One where folks are just able to use AI to apply to lots and lots of jobs. That actually seems like not a bad thing necessarily, so long as companies have ways to deal with that influx of applications. But then there's other tools that maybe misrepresent your experience to try to game the system. And that feels like now we're definitely crossing the line. Anything that helps you misrepresent what your actual skills and experience are. Melissa, I'm curious, from your perspective, you talk to so many candidates. Why do you think candidates are using AI to maybe misrepresent who they are, or to, I don't want to say cheat, but like well, maybe, yeah, cheat on interviews when a company says explicitly, please don't use AI for this. What do you think is happening in the market right now? And what are companies doing that might be leading candidates to take these steps?
I think what's happening is the job market is so incredibly competitive and challenging that job seekers are using AI to give them a leg up. Um, I've been in recruiting for 2 decades, and I'm sure everyone on this call will attest. This is a really, really challenging time, unfortunately, to be looking for a job. As someone who, I've read thousands and multiple thousands of resumes over the years, I could pretty much tell when a resume is AI generated versus a resume that's not AI generated. I'm not saying it's bad to use AI to help with your resume, but there has to be some authenticity to make it sound like it's not 100% AI generated. I think that's really, really important. And I think that's why I'll just say this in terms of like all these different companies that have these interview processes where you're actually talking to like AI. I am so against that. First of all, I don't think any candidate deserves to talk into a computer at a fake person. But more importantly, and I feel very strongly about this, is that first of all, not only do candidates deserve better, but candidates deserve to have an authentic conversation with a live person, right? So when I'm phone screening candidates for my roles, I talk to them. I have a Zoom call with them. I see them versus, okay, candidate, here's a link, create an account, and the system's going to give you 10 questions and we need you to answer them. And then our software will determine potential next steps for your candidacy. I think because of AI, one of the things that I don't like about it is it's taking away the human touch of recruiting. Like recruiting should be a human, there's a human element, right? Searching for a job is very emotional. It's important, right? When people are searching for a job. And candidates deserve to actually have authentic conversations with the company, not here's an AI screening tool, and then we'll get back to you if we even do get back to you, with all the ghosting going on. So that's why when I do consulting with my clients, I always say to them, be very selective with how you use AI, but never ever lose sight of the candidate experience and put yourself in the shoes of the candidate and how you would feel if you were the one looking for a job. Treat your candidates the way you would want to be treated. And doing this, you're never going to go wrong.
Oh, I really like that insight. Martyn, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was going to give a little bit of a counterpoint to that. And so, when we look at the stats that are out there, 61% of candidates are ghosted, even after an interview, not even after application, even after the interview. And application numbers have gone up between 30 and 50% in the last 24 months because of AI generated resumes and applications. And I think that recruiters are completely overwhelmed. When we look at the statistics around that first kind of phone screen, and we know that on average each phone screen takes kind of 8 to 9 minutes. That means that if a recruiter is all they are doing is phone screening all day 9 to 5, they can do 53 phone screens a day. That's what 265 a week. So if we think about the number of applications that recruiters are dealing with per requisition, and we know that they have a capacity of 265 phone screens per week, and if that's all they're doing per week, then I think it's actually impossible for them to give that human element to that first level of screening. And I think that's where AI comes in, because we can do that first kind of binary screening. Are you in the right location? Are you looking for the right salary? Do you have the right availability? That kind of first binary level of screening can absolutely be outsourced to AI. And that means two things. That means that recruiter human capacity is no longer an issue because we're now dealing with machine capacity. Number two, every single candidate gets a response to their application, and that's not something that happens nowadays. So I think actually when we look at designing the candidate experience, we need to be less caring about that first step, because that first step is where we lose trust in the candidate, because they never hear back from an application. And it's not because recruiters are bad at their job, which is what candidates automatically think. It's because we just don't have the capacity to deal with the volume. So I think that's the counterpoint to using AI right at that very beginning part of the process, just to deal with that volume.
Yeah,
It
I
is.
could.
I was going to say it is pretty interesting, but Melissa, yeah, what were you going to say? What do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly that the applicant tracking systems right now that I'm currently using for my clients, we ask those pre-screen questions up front, like,
Right. Yeah.
like salary requirements. Are you eligible to work in the United States? Are you okay coming on site 3 days a week? So we pump out those questions to differentiate who meets the minimum requirements and who doesn't. And then from there, we take it, we send a rejection letter to the people that don't meet the minimum requirements. But I think a lot of these applicant tracking systems on the back end, you can create these knockout questions. I hate the word knockout questions because it sounds like you're wanting to knock people out, but that's really what they're called. But I think
Yeah.
a lot of companies are using these questions to kind of separate the viable candidates from those that don't meet those requirements.
I somewhat agree. I think there's one specific case though where it could make sense. I'm curious if this resonates. I when I think about AI and like where to apply AI, I oftentimes think, is there a different way we could use technology? I think a lot of folks are so excited about the AI hype that they're trying to throw AI at every single problem. But like sometimes like a simple binary yes no knockout question in the application process can do just as well, and it's actually more efficient for both sides rather than
Yeah.
trying to have somebody sit through like a 10-minute AI interview where they're like kind of banging their head against how to like talk to this person that isn't even really a human. One of the issues here is like, I think the quality of that sort of the AI voice interview technology just isn't there yet. So the candidate experience isn't great. I think to Melissa's point, maybe once the quality of that AI gets better, maybe candidates would actually prefer that to filling out some questions in their application process. And to me, that might be the tipping point where you could offer candidates to either fill out the set of knockout questions or talk to somebody, talk to an AI. I do think the one exception is maybe outside of knowledge worker hiring, outside of tech, outside of, and so when we think about like frontline worker hiring, where folks are hiring at volume, oftentimes like resumes are super sparse. Maybe people don't even have resumes. People are interfacing over text messages. They might not even be applying through like the standard ATS application process. And so, I have seen and heard of like some enterprise customers using AI and either chatbots, which can be like a nice way to interface with those kinds of candidates over like text message, and might even be preferred to them than trying to go to like an ATS and fill out a form. And then I've seen some folks starting to like experiment with voice there. But I'm curious if that use case, Melissa, if that resonates with you in terms of like a valid place to use AI interviewers.
Yeah, I think AI could be a great thing as long as companies don't lose sight of the candidate experience. I think to
Yeah.
me, like that's when I work with my clients and we talk about AI and implementation of different systems, I hone in on them all the time that the candidate experience is really important because even though the job market's really tough right now, I've been recruiting long enough to know that everything is cyclical, right? Right now, we're in what I would call an employer driven market. And I hope I'm right in saying that in due time, the pendulum will change and we'll be in an employee driven market. Candidates talk, candidates will remember how they were treated. There's sites like Glassdoor. I see a lot of people on LinkedIn calling out companies that did them wrong. I'm starting to see that all the time. So as long as the candidates are treated with as much white glove service as possible, I think AI can be used, but it has to be used selectively.
I think,
Yeah.
I know this isn't the subject of this conversation today, but I think that we're grossly misunderestimating candidate experience and candidate expectations if we think that everybody wants to speak to a human every single time. We don't book our holidays by going into travel agents on the high street and talking to humans anymore. We do it online. We don't buy products anymore by going into shops. We do it online because we want immediacy, convenience, and agency. We don't want to wait for people because people are slow. And that's the issue. So I think when we're looking at candidate experience, we also need to think about modern consumer experiences and what people have as an expectation for how they interface and engage with a business, and represent that. If you're working for a business that's also consumer facing, You want to be matching your consumer ways of interacting on the recruitment side as well as the consumer side, because your candidates are also your customers. And I think that the challenge there is matching up both. And I think we're a little bit behind when it comes to that in recruitment.
Just spitballing a little bit here. I kind of get both sides of this. If it's a bad candidate experience, that'll turn off candidates. But on the flip side, like, not every candidate can get a recruiter phone screen. And I think the promise of like using AI to assess in that first step is, well, now everybody could get a shot, right? That's kind of the promise, is like, even if you were applicant 2000, even if you didn't, fall above the fold in terms of the ATS's like AI match score, you could still give like a much broader range of folks a shot. And so I kind of wonder, like, if making it optional, saying like, hey, we get a lot of applicants for this role. We hope to get to your application, but if you want to increase the chances of that, there's this optional step where you can do an AI assessment. Would you like to take that? Does that feel like it's starting to balance, like, the nuance of both sides? What do you think of like an optional step like that, Melissa?
I think it's an interesting question. I think it will separate the real serious contenders for the job, the people that really want the job versus those that don't. And I think, again, because of the state of the current job market, I think most people, I would imagine, would go for it and would actually do it. And then the people that drop out for whatever reason, those people aren't considered. That might be a happy medium if it's done right.
Right. Yeah. And I'm just spitballing here. I haven't really thought about this issue before. So I see some folks chiming in the chat. I do think there's really valid points on both sides of this, though.
I
wow.
think
I was just saying, it looks like Emily has in chat has even done this before, and they found some really great success with it.
Amazing.
Cool.
Amazing. I mean, it's going so quickly with the chat. I can't keep up with it.
I know. There's no way I'm only able to catch 20%.
No, it's fantastic. It's great engagement. I was going to say, look, getting back to the subject, the topic on point. The one thing that this conversation is absolutely proving, from a candidate experience perspective, from a recruiter experience perspective, from a fraud experience perspective, is that we shouldn't be relying on applications that are centered around providing a resume, because what we're seeing now is a mass supply, which is just submitting a resume, which is creating issues with candidate experience, creating issues with the recruiter experience. It's also creating issues with fraud. So I'd hope that we can all agree that one of the things that we can do to reduce the fraud side of things and also reduce the poor experience side of things is to try and eliminate the CV, the resume.
Interesting. How do we do it?
Absolutely. How do we do it? Yeah, I mean, we could spend ages talking about skills-based hiring and assessments up front and all those kind of wonderful things. But I think that's where it has to start. I think one of the things that AI has absolutely done is just prove to us just how worthless a resume is, and completely devalued any kind of text-based application process. Resume, cover letter, because not only is it causing problems from a fraud perspective, we won't even talk about the issues around cybersecurity, allowing files to be uploaded into an ATS and all those kind of horrific things. But it sounds to me very much like it's the center of all issues when it comes to candidate and recruiter experience as well.
Really interesting. Well, I do want to make time for questions. We're right at the 45-minute mark. We've got about 15 minutes left for Q&A. But also just looking at the chat here, I saw like a cool tip from James. Like, if you suspect a deep fake, get them to wave their hand in front of the face. I actually, Jem went through Y Combinator, YC, 8 years ago or something like that. And they've put together some really great resources on how to detect this sort of stuff. And that's one of their tips. So I think it's a really interesting tip. Actually, I'm curious, Melissa, how do you think candidates feel about being asked to wave their hand in front of their face? Is that offensive, or is that like kind of, how would you bring that up? How would you frame that to a candidate in a way that would land?
Oh, That's a really tough one, but almost like if you think, I'd have to think about that. I think it's okay to ask.
It's
I
okay
think
to
it's
ask.
okay to
Okay, cool,
ask, but
cool.
maybe with some content in terms of context in terms of why you're asking. I think it's
Oh,
okay.
yeah. So share a little bit. Hey, look, like we've just been dealing with a lot of.
Exactly.
I'm
Exactly.
guessing. I'm really guessing this isn't the case, but are you can just to yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So
Uh,
Or
so
you
let's
can start by waving and hope they wave back.
Yeah,
Or
oh
absolutely.
yeah.
So we should be doing that. We should all have been doing that at the beginning of the call anyway, just to prove we weren't avatars. But look, let's come at it from this perspective. When you're hiring somebody, on a monthly basis or a weekly or daily, whatever contract they're on, but on a monthly basis, you're giving that person potentially thousands of dollars. And that could be across the year. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. When you go into a bank and you ask for a loan for $5,000, the amount of hoops that you have to go through to get that money into your bank, the credit checks, the fraud checks, the KYC checks, writing a letter from your auntie's cousin in reference for you, all of that process we have to go through to get a loan for $5,000, which may just be your monthly salary. So if you think about it like that, when you're asking an employer to hand you over that kind of funds on a monthly basis into your bank account, why aren't we asking people to go through the same kind of financial fraud checks that a bank would ask us if they were giving us a percentage of that money? So I think that actually, we have to start thinking about this very pragmatically and realistically. Ultimately, asking somebody to wave at a camera to prove they're not fake is much better than asking them to go through several rounds of background checking that a bank would ask you for a percentage of the kind of funds that we're guaranteeing to give somebody.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I have heard of a lot more companies starting to, well, actually, to your point, like do much deeper identity checks near the end of the process
Yeah.
because of all the fraud. I think it makes sense. I think it's reasonable given what's happening out there. There is this question though that I have is what other things can companies do at the beginning of the process to maybe identify folks? We've talked about a lot of different examples of fraud, scams, folks misrepresenting who they are. Like any other tips at the beginning of the process to catch this kind of stuff? Because it's great if you can do a deep identity check at the end, but now both sides have wasted all this time. And so, yeah, like I saw there's obviously like the hand in front of the face on if you're on an interview, but like how do you catch these things before you even jump on an interview? Any tips or things that you've heard of?
We've got things like checking kind of IP compared to where they say they are on their resume, and those kind of geographic kind of checks. Obviously that can be falsified quite easily as well, but it's simple checks like that could potentially be done. Unfortunately there isn't one standard way of doing this now. We could have proof of personhood, we could have waving in front of us, we could have holding an ID up, we could be asking somebody to do something live for us that wasn't within the interview briefing. But ultimately we're trying to catch people out, and like Melissa said, that isn't the best when it comes to experience and when it comes to reputation. So we do need to start thinking about potentially some of the ways that we allow people to enter into the hiring process. So like I said, maybe changing up the way that we apply, so we don't apply via resume, via cover letter. We actually do an upfront assessment, and potentially a lot of assessment providers now have got anti-fraud capabilities within their platforms. Some of the kind of coding assessments do, some of the kind of other assessment providers do that are out there as well. So I think that there's lots we can do to change up the way that people apply, and that changes the whole dynamic around allowing people to enter into the process who might be coming in fraudulently.
Super interesting. Melissa, I'm curious to get your take on this. I've heard of a lot of companies. So one of the big reasons why I think it's possible to have a lot more fraud and folks misrepresenting who they are, cheating on interviews, is because a lot of the interview processes are remote. And so actually when I work and talk with our customers that are hiring like remote first, they're dealing with this a lot more than folks that are hiring for in-person roles. Because if you have to come in person, it's like, really hard to pretend to be somebody you're not. And so I've heard of even remote companies or companies that are hybrid, some of the roles are remote, moving to a world where they are requiring in-person interviews, or they're saying that part of onboarding will be in person. And they're making that clear up front. And it's actually deterring a lot of people from applying, a lot of folks that could be trying to do fraud, because they'd rather go after easier targets. But I'm curious, Melissa, what do you think of that approach? And how does that feel for candidates from a candidate experience perspective?
What I usually do with my candidates is go through the hiring process up front with them. Number one, from a candidate experience standpoint, I think it's the right thing to do to set those expectations. But for the clients that I'm working with, they all, I typically do the initial call, and then they have to actually go on site to interview with the team, because my clients are 100% on site. They don't offer remote. And it's interesting how many people back out of the process, whether they're fake or whether they just don't want to go on site. But I think if you set the expectations up front, is here's the hiring process, these are the expectations. And if you say that there are on-site interviews and you all of a sudden never hear from that person again, well, that's my answer.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a trend I'm seeing, a shift back to on-site interviews. I've even heard of a few companies saying that part of the interview process or part of onboarding will be on site, even though it's not, just to deter fraudulent and applicants and scammers, which is another interesting approach. I mean, Melissa, how does that feel from a candidate experience perspective? If you say like that, now it feels like we're setting the wrong expectations up front.
It's that fine line of safeguarding the company with trying to have a good candidate experience. But I think companies are getting burned, candidates are getting burned. It's kind of a convoluted mess in a lot of ways, which is why I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think it's an important one to have. I'll say too, is that, AI is not going anywhere, and it's only going to get more advanced. So it's tough. It's tough. Interestingly enough, 5 years ago, I don't even remember AI ever being a part of talent acquisition at all. And now it's taking over everything. And I can only imagine what it's going to look like even a year from now with all of the advances we're seeing.
Yeah.
Fasten your seatbelts.
Kevin says amen in the chat there. I mean, this is a good segue into one of the last questions we had been thinking about, and actually a question that somebody wrote in the Q&A. Future, right? How do we see the future? AI is just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. It's clear that it's here to stay. 5 years from now, what does this look like? Do we all just have our AI agents talking to each other? What does it mean to bring authenticity and the human element in recruiting as AI becomes more and more prevalent? I think the exact question that somebody wrote in is do we see agentic AI as being an extension of humanity in the near future? Think The Matrix. What are your perspectives on that? Let's imagine 3-5 years out. How do you see this stuff playing out?
It's anyone's guess. Again, I think artificial intelligence is only going to increase. It's definitely not going away. It's crazy to think of how much more advanced it is now than it was even 6 months ago. But I think we have to have a new baseline regarding authenticity. Even when I think of the year 2030, I think authenticity is going to be multi-layered, both in how candidates present themselves and how employers interact with candidates. One thing I will say, though, and I know I've mentioned this a couple of times throughout this conversation, is to me, what's super, super important is that we just don't lose sight of the candidate experience. I hope that trust will improve and will not get worse between candidates and companies. I think there's going to have to be ways to build that trust and to win back that trust. It's an interesting time for sure. Buckle up your seatbelt. We'll see how it goes.
Martyn, what do you think?
Yeah, Gartner reckons that by 2028, 1 in 4 candidates are going to be fake. So we need to come up with a solution for that. And for me, I think we need to have a robust solution that proves the person, and that for me is on device, in your phone's wallet, blockchain based verification. That because ultimately we can pay for things on our credit cards on our phone, we can show our kind of government ID on our phone. Why can't we have something on our phone that provides that verification of who we are? And I think that we're going to get to that point, where I know Sam Altman's got another business, the WorldCoin business, where it's all about proof of person, and I think that that's where we're going to get to, is upfront proof of personhood from the person that's applying. And then after that, absolutely, it's about the best candidate experience we can give, whether that's in person, remote, AI based, human based. That's down to each individual business. But I think from a fraud perspective, it's changing up the way that people access the process. It's also proving through on device biometric verification that you are the person that the business is speaking to.
Awesome. Well, we've got a few more minutes here. I always like to wrap by asking Melissa, Martyn, what's one thing that you want to leave everybody with today? And then also, where can people find you? If you're up for it, maybe drop your LinkedIn or anything else in the chat here. I'm going to drop mine. Would love to hear from this group if anybody wants to connect with me afterwards. Just added my LinkedIn in the chat there. But Melissa, what's the one thing that you want people to walk away from today's discussion with?
Yeah. So the first is regarding, okay, I'm just going to leave my LinkedIn profile, sorry, in the chat. Would love to connect with you, all of you here. The one thing I will say is, again, if you think you're ever being potentially scammed, reach out to me on LinkedIn. You are not bothering me. I help people with this daily, all day. I actually enjoy it. And I've saved a lot of people heartache. So, just reach out. I'm very, very responsive. The other thing I'll say is, if you are a job seeker right now, my heart is with you. It's tough out there. I know. Just keep going, keep at it. You only need one yes. And if there's anything I could ever do to support you, of course, let me know. And then the last thing I'll say is just be careful out there. There's a lot of scammers. If something feels off, it probably is. And I just wish everyone all the best.
Thanks, Melissa. Martyn, what would you like this group to leave with today, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I've put my LinkedIn in the message in the chat box, and obviously it's so quick it's gone already. But I'm on LinkedIn. You can search for me, Martyn with a Y. There's another funny story about that I'll tell everyone else another time. But look, what am I going to leave you with today? I think that this has been a fascinating conversation. I think what it's proven is that there is no one fix for this. So if I was a TA leader, an HR leader, recruitment head of recruitment at a business, I'd be going back to the office tomorrow, and I'd sit down with my security team, my CIO team, and I would talk about how we can change up the process to eliminate the CV right at the very beginning. I think that is the critical choke point of when it comes to fraud and when it comes to overwhelming the recruitment process. So I think tomorrow would be the day that I would start thinking about how I eliminate the resume and the cover letter from the recruitment process.
Interesting take. Well, I love it. This has been such a cool, interesting conversation. Thanks for getting kind of messy and unpolished and unprepared with me today, and just talking about what's really going on. This has been really fun. I think the folks in the chat, everybody tuning in, really enjoyed this too. Just based on the flurry of messages we had a hard time keeping up with. I hope a lot of you had your questions answered. I know we got to a lot of them. If there's things we didn't get to today, feel free to reach out to any of us. We all dropped our LinkedIn in the chat there, and feel free to connect with us afterwards. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And another big thank you to Melissa and to Martyn for joining us today.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having us.
It's been a great conversation. Take care.
Okay, bye.